The wind didn't howl in Iron Ridge Valley. It screamed. It came down from the mountains like something alive, tearing through the pines and slamming against the valley floor with enough force to rattle windows and snap fence posts. Snow didn't fall here. It attacked. Horizontal sheets of ice that could strip the skin off your face if you were stupid enough to stand in it. Rowan Blackthorne had stopped being stupid a long time ago. He stood at the window of his ranch house, one hand resting on the frame, the other wrapped around a mug of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. Outside, the world was white. Not the clean, postcard kind of white. This was the kind that erased everything. Fences, trees, the road that led out to town. The kind that made you forget there was anything beyond the walls of your own house. He didn't mind. Forgetting was easier than remembering. The ranch had been in his family for 3 generations, though there wasn't much family left to speak of. His father had died when Rowan was 19, his mother 2 years later, and his wife. He turned away from the window. The house was too big for one man. 4 bedrooms, a kitchen that could feed a dozen people, a living room with a stone fireplace that hadn't seen a real fire in years. He kept it clean, more out of habit than care. Swept the floors, washed the dishes, fixed what broke. But he didn't live here. He just existed. The clock on the mantel read 9:47 p.m. He drained the rest of his coffee, bitter and thick, and set the mug on the counter. Another night, another storm, another stretch of silence that would last until dawn. Then he heard it. A sound, faint, almost swallowed by the wind. He stopped, tilting his head. There it was again. A knock. Rowan stood perfectly still, his body already shifting into the old instincts from years he didn't like to think about. His hand moved to the rifle leaning against the wall near the door. A .30-30 Winchester, loaded, always loaded. Out here, you didn't open your door unarmed, not during a storm, not ever. The knock came again. Weaker this time. He crossed the room in 4 long strides and stopped at the door, rifle in hand, barrel pointed down. His other hand went to the deadbolt. "Who's out there?" No answer. Just the wind. He waited 5 seconds, then pulled the bolt and yanked the door open, raising the rifle to his shoulder in one smooth motion. The cold hit him like a fist. And standing on his porch, half collapsed against the railing, was a woman. She was big, not tall, but solid, curved in a way that spoke of strength before exhaustion had taken over. Her coat was torn at the shoulder, her jeans soaked through and frozen stiff. Her hair, dark and matted with ice, clung to her face. But it was her eyes that stopped him, exhausted, desperate, and entirely unnervingly calm. She didn't flinch at the rifle. She just looked at him, and then she spoke, her voice barely a rasp. "I can work." Rowan didn't move. "I can cook. Clean. Fix things." Her breath came out in shallow clouds. "Just, please." That's when he saw it. Bundled against her chest, wrapped in what looked like 3 layers of blankets and a torn coat, was a baby. A baby. In this storm. Rowan's grip tightened on the rifle. "What the hell are you doing out here?" "Walking." Her knees buckled slightly, and she caught herself against the doorframe. 10 miles. Maybe more. 10 miles? He stared at her. "You walked 10 miles through this? With a baby?" She nodded. "From where?" She didn't answer. "Lady, I don't know what you're running from, but I'm not asking for charity." Her voice sharpened, just enough to cut through the wind. "I'll work. I'll earn my keep. Just let us stay until the storm breaks." Rowan looked past her, into the swirling white chaos beyond his porch. Nothing. No car, no lights, no one following her. Just her. And the baby. He should have said no. He should have told her to go to town, find the sheriff, get help from someone who wasn't him. He should have closed the door and gone back to his cold coffee and his empty house. But the baby shifted in her arms, and a tiny hand emerged from the blankets. Rowan exhaled. "Get inside." She didn't move. "Now," he said, stepping back and lowering the rifle, "before you freeze to death on my porch." She stumbled forward, and he caught her by the elbow before she could fall. She was heavier than she looked, solid muscle beneath the exhaustion. He kicked the door shut behind them, and the wind scream cut off like a severed throat. The silence inside was almost worse. She stood in the entryway, dripping melted snow onto his floor, her whole body trembling. The baby made a soft sound, not quite a cry, just a murmur of discomfort. Sit, Rowan said, nodding toward the chair near the fireplace. She didn't argue. She moved slowly, like every step cost her, and sank into the chair with a long, shuddering breath. Her arms stayed locked around the baby. Rowan set the rifle down and crossed to the fireplace. He grabbed a few logs from the stack and started building a fire, his hands moving on autopilot. Kindling, paper, a match. The flames caught quickly, crackling to life and throwing heat into the room. He stood, wiping his hands on his jeans, and turned to face her. "What's your name?" She looked up at him, her face pale and hollow in the firelight. "Mara." "Mara what?" She hesitated. "Calloway." "Rowan Blackthorn." He nodded toward the baby. "That yours?" "Yes." "What's his name?" "Eli." Rowan studied the bundle in her arms. The baby's eyes were open, wide, dark, unnervingly aware. He didn't cry, didn't fuss, just stared. "How old?" "6 months." "And you walked 10 miles through a blizzard with a 6-month-old baby?" "Yes." "Why?" Mara's jaw tightened. "Because I didn't have a choice." Rowan let the silence stretch. He'd learned a long time ago that people filled silence when you gave them enough of it. But Mara didn't. She just sat there, holding her son, staring into the fire like it was the first warmth she'd felt in weeks. He sighed. "You hungry?" "Starving." "When's the last time you ate?" "Yesterday, maybe." Rowan turned and walked into the kitchen, pulling open the fridge. He grabbed what he had, leftover stew, some bread, a jar of butter. He dumped the stew into a pot and set it on the stove, turning the burner to medium. "You got a car?" he called over his shoulder. "No." "How'd you get out here?" "Walked." "From where?" No answer. He glanced back at her. She was still staring at the fire, rocking slightly, the baby tucked against her chest. "Mara." She looked up. "Where did you come from?" Her eyes met his, and for a moment he saw something flicker there. Fear. Real, bone-deep fear. "Somewhere I can't go back to." Rowan stirred the stew, watching her out of the corner of his eye. "Someone after you?" She didn't answer. "That's a yes." "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." The stew started to bubble. He grabbed a bowl from the cabinet, ladled it full, and set it on the table, along with a spoon and a chunk of bread. "Eat." Mara shifted Eli to one arm and reached for the spoon with the other. Her hands were shaking so badly she nearly dropped it. She managed to get a spoonful to her mouth, and the moment the food hit her tongue, her eyes closed. She ate like someone who hadn't seen a meal in days. Rowan leaned against the counter, arms crossed, watching her. She wasn't lying about being hungry, and she wasn't lying about walking through the storm. No one faked that kind of exhaustion, but she was lying about something. When the bowl was empty, she set the spoon down and looked at him. "Thank you." He nodded. "I meant what I said. I can work. I don't need help. Everyone needs help. Not me." Mara tilted her head, studying him with those tired, knowing eyes. "You live out here alone?" "Yes." "By choice?" "Yes." "Then you're lying too." Rowan's jaw tightened. "Excuse me?" "No one chooses to be this alone." She gestured around the house. "This place is too big for one person. Too clean. Too—" She trailed off, her gaze landing on the mantel, on the photo frame turned face down. Rowan followed her eyes and felt something cold settle in his chest. "That's none of your business." "You're right." She stood, cradling Eli. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have—" "You can stay tonight," he said, cutting her off. "Storm will break by morning, then you leave." Mara nodded slowly. "Okay." "There's a bedroom upstairs, second door on the left. Sheets are clean." "Thank you." She started toward the stairs, then stopped. "Rowan?" He looked at her. "I really can work. I'm good at it, and I won't be trouble." "Everyone's trouble," he said quietly. She smiled just a little, sad and knowing. "Yeah, I guess that's true." Then she turned and climbed the stairs, her footsteps slow and heavy. Rowan watched her go, watched the shadows swallow her and the baby, and then he was alone again. He stood there for a long time, staring at the empty staircase. Then he walked to the mantel, picked up the photo frame, and turned it over. A woman smiled back at him. Dark hair, bright eyes. One hand resting on a belly that hadn't yet started to show. He set the frame back down, face down, and went to bed. The storm didn't break by morning. It got worse. Rowan woke to the sound of wind battering the house like fists on a door. He rolled out of bed, pulled on his jeans and a flannel shirt, and padded downstairs in his socks. The fire had burned down to embers. The house was cold. He rebuilt the fire, then started coffee. That's when he smelled it. Bacon. He turned. Mara stood at the stove, fully dressed in clothes that weren't hers, one of his old shirts, rolled at the sleeves, and a pair of his sweatpants tied tight at the waist. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun. Eli sat in a makeshift sling against her chest, awake and watching everything with those unnerving dark eyes. "Morning," she said without looking up. Rowan stared. "What are you doing?" "Making breakfast." "I told you." Storm didn't break. She flipped the bacon. "So I'm still here, and if I'm still here, I'm working." "I didn't ask you to." "I know." She glanced at him. "But I did anyway." He opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. The bacon smelled good, really good, and there were eggs scrambling in another pan, toast browning in the oven. "You went through my fridge," he said. "You went through mine last night when you fed me." "That's different." "How?" He didn't have an answer. She plated the food and set it on the table. 2 plates, 2 forks, 2 mugs of coffee. "Sit." Rowan sat. They ate in silence, the wind howling outside, the fire crackling behind them. The food was perfect. The eggs were fluffy, the bacon crisp, the toast buttered just right. When he finished, he set his fork down and looked at her. "Where'd you learn to cook like that?" "My grandmother." Mara wiped Eli's face with a cloth. "She raised me, taught me everything." "She's still around?" "No." "I'm sorry." Mara shrugged. "It was a long time ago." Rowan sipped his coffee, watching her. She moved with purpose, even exhausted, efficient, no wasted motion. "You said you walked 10 miles. "Yes." "In a blizzard." "Yes." "With a baby." "We've established that." "Why?" Mara's hands stilled. She looked down at Eli, brushing a finger across his cheek. "Because staying would have killed us." The words hung in the air. Rowan set his mug down slowly. "Someone hurt you." It wasn't a question. Mara didn't answer. "Mara, I don't want to talk about it. If someone's looking for you, they won't find me here." Her voice was firm, final. "The storm covered my tracks, and by the time it clears, I'll be gone." "Gone where?" "Somewhere else. With no car, no money, and a baby. I'll manage." Rowan leaned back in his chair, studying her. She was lying again, not about the danger, that was real, but about managing. She had no plan, no backup. She was running on fumes and desperation. "You can't go out in this," he said. "I will when it clears." "And if it doesn't clear for 3 days?" Mara's jaw tightened. "Then I'll wait 3 days?" "Doing what?" "Working." "I told you I don't need—" "Look around, Rowan." She gestured at the house. "This place is falling apart. The curtains are torn. The floor's scratched to hell. Half the cabinet doors don't close right. You've got a loose shingle on the roof. I can hear it banging every time the wind hits. You're living like a man who stopped caring years ago." Her words hit harder than they should have. "So, let me help," she said quietly. "Let me earn my keep. And when the storm breaks, I'll leave. You'll never see me again." Rowan looked at her for a long time, then he sighed. 3 days. 3 days, she agreed. "You work, you stay out of my way, and you don't ask questions. Deal." They shook on it, and that was how Mara Calloway became part of Rowan Blackthorn's life. Year-Sam. The first day she cleaned. Rowan spent most of it outside, checking on the livestock, reinforcing the barn doors, making sure the generator had enough fuel. When he came back inside, the house looked different. The floors were swept. The windows were wiped down. The curtains, old torn things he hadn't thought about in years, were gone. replaced with sheets she'd somehow fashioned into makeshift drapes. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "I know." Eli sat in a nest of blankets near the fire, chewing on a wooden spoon. He looked up when Rowan walked in, those dark eyes tracking him across the room. "He always this quiet?" Rowan asked. "Yes." "That normal?" Mara smiled faintly. "He's observant, takes after me." Rowan grunted and hung his coat by the door. "Storm's not letting up." "I know." "Might be here longer than 3 days." "I know." He looked at her. She was folding laundry, his laundry, which she'd apparently washed without asking. "You don't have to do all this." "I want to." "Why?" She paused, holding one of his shirts. "Because it feels good to be useful." Something about the way she said it made Rowan's chest tighten. He cleared his throat. "I'm going to fix the fence in the south pasture tomorrow, if the wind dies down. I'll make you lunch. You don't—" "I know." He shook his head and walked into the kitchen, pouring himself a glass of water. When he turned back, Mara was watching him. "What?" "Nothing," she said. "Just thank you for letting us stay." "Don't thank me yet." "Why not?" "Because you don't know me." Mara tilted her head. "I know enough." "You don't know anything." "I know you opened the door," she said quietly. "Most people wouldn't have." Rowan didn't have an answer for that. He drained his water and went upstairs. The second day she cooked. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, each meal better than the last. Rowan didn't know where she was getting the ingredients. He didn't keep much in the house, but somehow she made magic out of canned goods and pantry staples. "Where'd you learn to do this?" he asked over dinner. "I told you, my grandmother." "She teach you anything else?" "Lots of things." Mara cut her chicken into small bites. "Sewing, gardening, how to shoot a rifle." Rowan's eyebrows went up. "You know how to shoot?" "Better than most men I've met." "That's so." She smiled. "Want to test me?" "Maybe." They ate in comfortable silence after that. Eli had fallen asleep in his blanket nest, one tiny fist curled under his chin. "He's a good baby," Rowan said. "He is." "Doesn't cry much." "No." "That normal?" Mara's smile faded slightly. "He cried a lot. Before." "Before what?" She didn't answer. Rowan set his fork down. "Mara, I should clean up." She stood abruptly, gathering the plates. "Mara." She kept moving. "Sit down." She stopped, her back to him. "Please," he added. Slowly she turned and sat back down. Her hands were shaking. "What happened to you?" Rowan asked quietly. "I told you, I don't want to talk about it." "You're scared." "Yes." "Of who?" Mara's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't let them fall. "Someone who's supposed to be dead." Rowan went still. "What does that mean?" "It means—" She took a shaky breath. "It means the world thinks he's gone. But I know better." "Who is he?" "My husband." The word landed like a stone. Rowan leaned back in his chair. "You're married." "Not anymore. Legally, anyway. He's dead. There was a fire. They found a body, but it wasn't him." "How do you know?" "Because I know him." Her voice hardened. "And he would never let me go that easily." Rowan studied her face, the fear, the exhaustion, the absolute certainty. "What's his name?" "Victor Graves." The name meant nothing to Rowan, but the way she said it, like a curse, like poison, told him everything he needed to know. "He hurt you." "Yes." "And the baby?" Her hands clenched into fists. "He never touched Eli. I made sure of that." "But he would have." "Yes." Rowan exhaled slowly. "So you ran." "I ran." "And you think he's looking for you?" "I know he is. Why come here? Why not go to the police?" Mara laughed bitterly. "Victor owns the police. He owns the town. He owns everything." "Not out here, he doesn't." She looked at him, hope flickering in her eyes. "You think that matters?" "Out here?" Rowan nodded. "Yeah, it does." They sat in silence for a long moment. Then Mara spoke, her voice barely a whisper. Why are you helping me? Rowan looked at the fire, at the flames dancing in the darkness. Because someone should have helped me once, he said quietly. And no one did. Mara didn't ask what he meant. She didn't need to. But the third day, she fixed things. Rowan woke to the sound of hammering. He pulled on his boots and followed the noise to the living room, where Mara stood on a chair, nailing the loose cabinet door back into place. Eli sat on the floor below her, perfectly content. What are you doing? Rowan asked. Fixing your cabinet. With what tools? I found them in the barn. You went to the barn? Yes. In the storm? It's not that bad today. Rowan looked out the window. She was right. The wind had died down. The snow had slowed to a gentle fall. Storm's breaking, he said. Mara's hand stilled on the hammer. Yeah, she said quietly. I know. Rowan watched her finish the repair, then stepped down from the chair. She tested the door. It swung smoothly, closing with a soft click. There, she said. Good as new. You didn't have to do that. I know. They stood there, not quite looking at each other. Roads will be clear by tomorrow, Rowan said. Probably. You could make it to town. Probably. Find a place to stay. Get help. Mara turned to face him. And then what? What do you mean? I mean, what happens when Victor finds me in town? When he shows up with lawyers and police and a dozen witnesses who'll swear I'm crazy? What happens when he takes Eli and I never see him again? Rowan's jaw tightened. That won't happen. You don't know that. I know that running forever isn't a life. It's better than the alternative. Is it? Mara's eyes flashed. You don't understand. Then explain it to me. I can't. Why not? Because you'll tell me to fight. You'll tell me to stand my ground and face him and trust the system. And I can't do that because the system doesn't work for people like me. It works for people like him. Her voice broke on the last word. Rowan took a step toward her. Mara, I'm tired, she whispered. I'm so tired of being afraid. Then stop running. I can't. Why not? Because if I stop, he wins. Rowan looked at her, really looked at her, at the woman who'd walked 10 miles through a blizzard, who'd cooked and cleaned and fixed his broken house, who'd smiled even when she was terrified. What if you didn't have to run alone? He said quietly. Mara's breath caught. What? Stay, Rowan said. Not for 3 days. Stay. Rowan, you said you could work. Prove it. Stay here. Help me run this place. And if your husband comes looking, he paused. He'll have to go through me. Mara stared at him, tears streaming down her face. You don't know what you're offering. Yeah, Rowan said. I do. He'll come for me. Let him. He's dangerous. So am I. Mara laughed through her tears. Why would you do this? Rowan looked at the house around them, the clean floors, the fixed cabinets, the warmth that had seeped back into the walls. Because this place hasn't felt like a home in a long time, he said, and you made it one again. Mara covered her mouth with her hand, her shoulders shaking. I don't even know you. You will. She looked at Eli, sleeping peacefully on the floor, then back at Rowan. Okay, she whispered. Okay? I'll stay. Rowan nodded slowly, and for the first time in years, he smiled. Not much, just a little, but it was there. The days turned into weeks. The storm finally broke, leaving the valley buried under 3 feet of snow. Rowan worked from dawn to dusk, clearing paths, feeding livestock, repairing damage. Mara worked alongside him, learning the rhythms of ranch life with surprising speed. She was strong, stronger than she looked, and she was smart. Within a week, she'd reorganized the entire pantry, fixed the broken gate on the chicken coop, and somehow convinced Rowan's ornery old mare to let her brush her mane. You're good with animals, Rowan said one afternoon, watching her work. I like them better than people, Mara replied. Can't blame you for that. She smiled. Eli grew too. At 6 months, he was starting to sit up on his own, his dark eyes following everything with intense focus. Rowan found himself watching the baby more than he wanted to admit. He reminded him of someone he'd lost. One night, after Eli had gone to sleep and Mara was washing dishes, Rowan poured himself a whiskey and sat by the fire. Can I ask you something? Mara said from the kitchen. Sure. The picture on the mantel, the one that's always face down. Who is she? Rowan's hand tightened on his glass. My wife. Mara went still. Was. Yeah. What happened? Rowan stared into the fire. Storm. 5 years ago. Worst one Iron Ridge ever saw. She was pregnant. 8 months. We were trying to get to the hospital when the truck went off the road. Mara's breath hitched. I got out, Rowan continued, his voice flat. She didn't. I'm so sorry. Don't be. It was a long time ago. That doesn't make it hurt less. Rowan looked at her. She was standing in the doorway, dish towel in hand, her eyes full of understanding. No, he said quietly. It doesn't. Mara crossed the room and sat down beside him. What was her name? Eleanor. That's beautiful. She was beautiful. They sat in silence for a while. Then Mara spoke. Victor wasn't always cruel, she said. When I met him, he was charming, confident. He made me feel safe. What changed? I got pregnant. Her voice went cold. And he realized I wasn't just his anymore. I was Eli's, and he couldn't stand that. So he hurt you. Every day. She pulled up her sleeve, revealing a faint scar along her forearm. This was from a glass. He threw it at me when Eli wouldn't stop crying. Rowan's jaw clenched. There are others, Mara said. Worse ones. Show me. She hesitated, then lifted her shirt just enough to reveal her ribs. A jagged scar ran from her side to her back. Broken bottle, she said. He said I embarrassed him at a dinner party. Rowan's hands curled into fists. If he ever comes here, he will, Mara said. It's not a question of if, it's when. Then we'll be ready. Mara looked at him, her eyes searching his face. Why are you doing this, Rowan? Really? Because you deserve better. So did Eleanor. The words hung between them. Rowan set his glass down. Yeah, he said quietly. She did. Mara reached out and took his hand, and for the first time since Eleanor's death, Rowan didn't pull away. The first sign came 2 weeks later. Rowan was out checking the fence line when he found them, footprints in the snow. Fresh. Leading up to the edge of his property and then back again. Someone had been watching the house. He followed the tracks as far as they went, his rifle slung over his shoulder, his breath misting in the cold air. They led to the road, where tire marks cut deep into the snow. Someone had parked here, watched, and left. Rowan stood there for a long time, staring at the tracks. Then he turned and walked back to the house. Mara was in the kitchen, kneading dough for bread. She looked up when he came in, and her smile faded. What's wrong? Someone was here. Her face went white. Where? Edge of the property. They didn't come close, but they were watching. Mara's hand stilled on the dough. It's him. You don't know that. I know. Rowan set the rifle down. Could be a hunter or someone lost. Rowan, I'll keep watch tonight. If they come back, they will. Mara's voice shook. He won't stop, not until he has me. Then he's going to be disappointed. Mara looked at him, fear and something else. Something like hope, warring in her eyes. You can't fight him alone. Who says I'm alone? She stepped closer. Rowan, you don't understand. Victor doesn't fight fair. He'll use the law. He'll use lies. He'll turn everyone against you. Let him try. And if he succeeds? Rowan met her gaze. Then we run. Mara's breath caught. We? Yeah, Rowan said. We. She closed the distance between them and wrapped her arms around him, burying her face in his chest. He held her, feeling her shake against him. Thank you, she whispered. Don't thank me yet. But she didn't let go, and neither did he. That night, Rowan sat by the window with his rifle across his lap, watching the darkness beyond the glass. Mara had taken Eli upstairs, but she hadn't gone to bed. He could hear her moving around, packing bags, preparing. She believed Victor was coming, and Rowan was starting to believe it too. The hours dragged on. Midnight came and went. 1 a.m., 2. At 3:17 he saw them. Headlights. 2 vehicles moving slow down the road toward his property. Rowan stood, checking his rifle, his heart steady and cold. The truck stopped at the edge of his land. 3 men got out. Rowan moved to the door, stepping out onto the porch. The cold bit into his skin, but he didn't feel it. "That's far enough," he called out. The men stopped. One of them stepped forward, a tall, lean man with a sharp face and cold eyes. "Rowan Blackthorne?" the man called back. "Who's asking?" "My name's Gideon Pike. I'm a private investigator." "Good for you. Get off my land." "I'm looking for someone. A woman. Mara Calloway. We have reason to believe she's here." Rowan's finger moved to the trigger. "You got a warrant?" "I don't need one. She's wanted for kidnapping." "Kidnapping who?" "Her own child." Rowan's blood went cold. "That's a lie." "Is it?" Pike smiled. "Or is that what she told you?" "I said get off my land. Mr. Blackthorne, I understand you want to help her, but you're harboring a fugitive. If you don't turn her over, you'll be charged as an accomplice." "Then charge me." Pike's smile faded. "You're making a mistake." "Wouldn't be my first." The two men stood there, locked in a silent standoff. Then Pike nodded. "We'll be back," he said. "With the law." "I'll be waiting." Pike and his men climbed back into their trucks and drove away, their headlights disappearing into the night. Rowan stood on the porch until the sound of their engines faded completely. Then he turned and went inside. Mara was standing at the bottom of the stairs, Eli in her arms, her face pale. "They're coming for me." "I know." "Rowan, I have to go. If I stay, they'll arrest you." "No." "Rowan." "I said no." He crossed to her, his voice firm. "You're not running anymore. We're going to fight this." "How?" "I don't know yet, but we'll figure it out." Mara's eyes filled with tears. "Why are you doing this?" Rowan looked at her, at this woman who'd stumbled into his life during a storm and changed everything. "Because you're not alone anymore," he said quietly. "And neither am I." Mara sobbed once, then pulled him into a fierce hug. And outside, the first light of dawn began to break over Iron Ridge Valley. The storm had passed, but the real fight was just beginning. The sun came up cold and sharp over Iron Ridge Valley, turning the snow into a field of broken glass. Rowan hadn't slept. He'd spent the hours after Pike left checking every window, every door, making sure the locks held and the rifle was loaded. Mara had finally gone upstairs around 5, Eli asleep against her shoulder, but Rowan could hear her moving around up there. Pacing. Waiting. He made coffee as the kitchen filled with pale morning light. His hands were steady, but his mind was racing. Pike would be back. That wasn't a threat. It was a promise. And when he came, he'd bring more than words. Footsteps creaked on the stairs. Mara appeared in the doorway, still wearing the same clothes from last night. Her hair was pulled back in a messy knot, and there were dark circles under her eyes. Eli was awake in her arms, gnawing on his fist. "Any sign of them?" she asked. "Not yet." "They'll come back." "I know." She crossed to the table and sat down heavily, settling Eli on her lap. The baby looked around the room with those unsettling dark eyes, taking everything in like he was cataloging it. "I need to tell you something," Mara said quietly. Rowan poured 2 mugs of coffee and set one in front of her. "Go ahead." "Victor's not just dangerous. He's connected. He has people everywhere, lawyers, judges, cops. Half the town's on his payroll." "Which town?" "Millbrook, about 40 miles east of here." Rowan knew the place. Small city, maybe 15,000 people. Rich enough to have money, small enough for one man to control if he had the right leverage. "How'd he get that kind of power?" Rowan asked. "Money. Fear. Both." Mara wrapped her hands around the mug but didn't drink. His family's been there for generations. They own half the businesses, most of the land. When his father died, Victor inherited everything, and he's been tightening his grip ever since. "What about the fire? The one that was supposed to kill him?" "His warehouse. It burned down 6 months ago. They found a body inside burned so badly they had to use dental records to identify it." She looked up at him. "But I saw the body before the fire. At the morgue. It wasn't him." "How do you know?" "Because Victor has a scar, right here." She touched her own collarbone. "From a car accident when he was 17. The body they found didn't have it." Rowan set his mug down. "You're saying he killed someone and staged his own death?" "Yes." "Why?" "I don't know." But whatever he's planning, it's bigger than just finding me. I'm just a loose end. And Eli? Mara's arms tightened around her son. He wants him, not because he loves him, because he owns him. In Victor's mind, Eli is his property, and you don't let your property walk away. Rowan leaned back in his chair, processing. This wasn't some domestic dispute. This was something colder, more calculated. When did you run? 3 weeks after the fire. I waited until I was sure he was alive. Then I took Eli and left in the middle of the night. I had a little money saved, not much. Enough to get me to the next town. I've been moving ever since. Until you ended up here. Until I ended up here. They sat in silence for a moment, the only sound Eli's soft babbling. Rowan, Mara said, you need to understand what you're up against. If you fight him, he won't just come after you. He'll destroy you. Your reputation, your land, everything. Let him try. I'm serious. So am I. Rowan met her eyes. I've got nothing left to lose, Mara. This ranch, this life, it's all I have. And if standing up to some rich bastard costs me everything, at least I'll go down fighting. Mara's eyes glistened. You're insane. Probably. And stubborn. Definitely. She laughed, just a little, and wiped her eyes. What do we do? First, we get ahead of this. If Pike's coming back with the law, we need our own lawyer. I don't have money for a lawyer. I do. Mara blinked. Rowan, this ranch has been in my family for 3 generations. I've got savings, not a fortune, but enough. He stood. There's a lawyer in town, Helen Carver. She's good. Doesn't take crap from anyone. You think she'll help? Only one way to find out. Rowan grabbed his coat and keys. Mara stood too, Eli still in her arms. I'm coming with you. No, you stay here. Keep the doors locked. If anyone shows up, anyone, you call me. Rowan, please. His voice softened. I need to know you're safe. Mara hesitated, then nodded. Okay, but be careful. Always am. He wasn't, but she didn't need to know that. The drive into town took 30 minutes on freshly plowed roads. Iron Ridge wasn't much. A main street with a handful of shops, a diner, a post office, and a small brick building that housed the town's only law office. Rowan parked out front and killed the engine. He hadn't been to town in months, maybe longer. People stared as he walked down the sidewalk. Some nodded, most didn't. He'd earned a reputation over the years. The hermit on the hill, the widower who'd lost his mind along with his wife. Let them talk. He pushed open the door to Carver and Associates. A bell chimed overhead. The receptionist looked up, a young woman with bright red hair and too much lipstick. Can I help you? I need to see Helen. Do you have an appointment? No. Then I'm afraid. Tell her it's Rowan Blackthorne. She'll see me. The receptionist's eyes widened slightly. She picked up the phone, murmured something, then hung up. She'll be right out. Rowan waited, standing by the window watching the street. A minute later, a door opened and Helen Carver walked out. She was in her 50s, sharp-eyed and sharper dressed, with gray hair pulled into a tight bun. She looked Rowan up and down. Well, she said, hell must have frozen over. Close. Iron Ridge did. Helen smirked. Come on back. Her office was small but tidy, shelves lined with law books, a desk covered in neat stacks of paperwork. She gestured to a chair. Sit. Talk. Rowan sat. I need help. That's obvious. What kind? The legal kind. Specifics, Rowan. I don't have all day. He took a breath. There's a woman staying at my ranch. Her name's Mara Calloway. She's running from her husband, ex-husband, Victor Graves. Helen's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Go on. He's supposed to be dead, died in a fire 6 months ago, but he's not. And now he's coming after her. Last night, a private investigator showed up at my place claiming she kidnapped her own kid, said they'd be back with the law. Did she? Did she what? Kidnap her kid. No, Eli's her son. She's protecting him. From what? From Victor. He abused her for years. She has scars to prove it. Helen leaned back in her chair, fingers steepled. Victor Graves. I know the name. Big family in Millbrook. Money. Power. Connections. That's the one. And you're harboring his wife, ex-wife. Legally? Rowan paused. I don't know. Then legally she might still be married, which complicates things. Helen tapped her desk. If he's declared dead, there'd be paperwork, death certificate, probate. But if he faked his death and she knows it, that's a whole different mess. Can you help or not? Helen studied him. Why are you doing this, Rowan? Does it matter? To me? No. To a judge? Maybe. Rowan looked out the window at the snow-covered street. Because someone should have helped me once, and no one did. Helen's expression softened slightly. Eleanor? He didn't answer. All right, she said. I'll take the case, but I need full disclosure. Everything Mara knows, everything you know. No surprises. Done. And my retainer is $5,000. Rowan pulled out his checkbook and wrote the amount without hesitation. Helen took it, glanced at the number, and nodded. I'll start digging into Victor Graves, see what I can find. In the meantime, if the law shows up at your door, do not let them in without a warrant. Do not answer questions without me present. Understood? Understood. And Rowan? He looked at her. Be ready. If Graves is as connected as you say, this is going to get ugly. I know. Good. Now get out of here. I've got work to do. Rowan stood and headed for the door. As he reached it, Helen called out, Rowan? He turned. You're doing the right thing. He nodded once and left. The drive back felt longer than the drive in. Rowan's mind churned with everything Helen had said. Warrants, testimony, judges. He'd spent 5 years avoiding the world, and now he was diving headfirst into the worst kind of mess. But when he pulled up to the ranch and saw Mara standing in the window, Eli in her arms, something settled in his chest. He was doing the right thing, even if it cost him everything. Mara met him at the door. What did she say? She'll help, but we need to be ready. For what? Everything. Over the next few days, the ranch became a different place. Rowan and Mara worked together, preparing for whatever came next. He taught her how to handle the rifle, how to shoot straight, and stay calm under pressure. She was a quick learner, her hands steady on the trigger. Where'd you learn to shoot before? He asked one afternoon as they practiced in the back field. My grandfather. He used to take me hunting when I was a kid. You any good? She fired 3 rounds, hitting the target dead center each time. Rowan raised an eyebrow. I'll take that as a yes. Mara smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Victor hated that I could shoot. Said it wasn't ladylike. Victor sounds like a piece of work. That's putting it mildly. They practiced until the sun started to set, then headed back inside. Eli was napping in his makeshift crib, a dresser drawer lined with blankets. Mara checked on him, brushing a finger across his cheek. He looks like you, Rowan said from the doorway. You think? Yeah, same eyes, same stubborn chin. Mara laughed softly. He's got his father's nose, though. The words hung in the air. Do you ever... Rowan trailed off. What? Regret him? Eli, I mean, because of who his father is. Mara turned to face him, her expression fierce. Never. Not once. Eli is the only good thing that came from that marriage, and I'd walk through hell 1,000 times over to keep him safe. Rowan nodded. Good. Why do you ask? Just wanted to make sure. That night they ate dinner in comfortable silence. Mara had made stew again, thick and rich, the kind that stuck to your ribs. Rowan ate 2 bowls and was reaching for a third when Mara spoke. Can I ask you something? Sure. Why didn't you remarry? After Eleanor? Rowan's spoon paused halfway to his mouth. That's a hell of a question. You don't have to answer. He set the spoon down. I thought about it. Once. There was a woman in town, Sarah. She was kind, patient. She didn't mind that I was a mess. What happened? I realized I didn't love her. I just didn't want to be alone. He looked at Mara. That didn't seem fair to either of us. Mara nodded slowly. Victor used to say I was lucky to have him, that no one else would want me. Rowan's jaw tightened. He was wrong. Was he? Yes. She looked at him, something vulnerable in her eyes. How do you know? Because you're sitting here. You walked 10 miles through a blizzard to save your son. You've worked harder in 3 weeks than most people work in a year, and you haven't given up. He leaned forward. That's not someone no one would want. That's someone worth fighting for. Mara's breath hitched. Rowan, a sound outside cut her off. Both of them froze. Rowan was on his feet in an instant, grabbing the rifle from beside the door. Mara scooped up Eli, who'd woken at the noise, and moved to the far corner of the room. Stay there, Rowan said quietly. He moved to the window, peering out into the darkness. At first he saw nothing, then movement, a shadow near the barn. Someone's out there, he said. How many? Can't tell. He moved to the door, unlocked it, and stepped out onto the porch. The cold hit him immediately, but he barely felt it. His focus was on the barn, on the shape moving in the darkness. Show yourself, he shouted. The figure stopped, then stepped into the moonlight. It was a man, tall, thin, wearing a long coat and a wide-brimmed hat. He raised his hand slowly. Easy now, the man called. I'm not here to cause trouble. Then what are you here for? To deliver a message. From who? Victor Graves. Rowan's finger moved to the trigger. Get off my land. I will, but first you need to hear this. The man took a step closer. Mr. Graves wants his wife and child back. He's willing to negotiate. There's nothing to negotiate. He's offering money, a lot of it, enough to set you up for life. Not interested. Then he's offering a warning. The man's voice went cold. Give them back or he'll take them, and when he does, you'll have nothing. Tell Victor Graves to go to hell. The man smiled. I'll pass that along. He turned and walked back toward the darkness, disappearing into the trees. A moment later, Rowan heard an engine start. Headlights flashed once, then faded as the vehicle drove away. Rowan stood on the porch for a long time, staring into the night. Then he went back inside. Mara was still in the corner, clutching Eli. Her face was pale. What did he say? Victor wants you back. He's offering money. And if you refuse, he'll take you by force. Mara closed her eyes. It's starting. Yeah. What do we do? Rowan set the rifle down and crossed to her. He took her hands in his. They were ice cold. We don't give up, he said. We don't run. We stand our ground. And if that's not enough, then we make it enough. Mara looked up at him, and for the first time since she'd arrived, Rowan saw something other than fear in her eyes. Hope. The next morning, Helen called. I found something, she said without preamble. Rowan switched the phone to speaker so Mara could hear. What is it? Victor Graves is alive. Officially, he's dead. Death certificate filed, estate in probate. But I found financial records, accounts that are still active, money moving around. Someone's pulling the strings. Can you prove it's him? Not yet, but I'm working on it. In the meantime, I need Mara to come in. I need her statement, her medical records, anything that proves abuse. Mara leaned closer to the phone. I have hospital records. From 2 years ago, broken ribs. Victor told the doctors I fell down the stairs. That'll work. Bring everything you have. And Rowan, be careful. If Victor's this connected, he's watching. I know. Helen hung up. Mara looked at Rowan. We're going to town? We have to. What if someone recognizes me? Then we deal with it. They left an hour later, Eli bundled in the truck's back seat, Mara wearing one of Rowan's old jackets and a baseball cap pulled low. The drive was tense, both of them watching the road for signs of trouble. Helen's office was quiet when they arrived. The receptionist, same redhead, barely looked up as they walked past. Helen was waiting in her office, a stack of papers spread across her desk. Mara, she said, standing, I'm Helen Carver. Thank you for helping us. Don't thank me yet. Sit. They sat. Helen pulled out a legal pad. I need you to tell me everything. Start from the beginning. When did you meet Victor? Mara took a breath. 5 years ago, I was working at a diner in Millbrook. He came in one night, ordered coffee, and we started talking. He was charming, confident. He made me feel special. When did things change? After we got married. It was small things at first. He didn't like the way I dressed, the friends I had. He wanted me to quit my job, stay home. I thought he was just being protective. When did it get physical? Mara's hands clenched. 6 months in. We had an argument about money. I told him I wanted to go back to work. He slapped me. Then he apologized. Said it would never happen again. But it did. All the time. He'd hit me, then buy me flowers, hurt me, then take me to dinner. It was a cycle, and I didn't know how to break it. Helen wrote quickly, her face impassive. What about Eli? When I got pregnant, I thought things would get better, but they got worse. Victor didn't want a child. He said it would ruin everything. He tried to convince me to... She trailed off. To terminate the pregnancy? Yes. I refused. And that's when he really started to hurt me. Helen's pen paused. Did he ever hurt Eli? No, I never let him get close enough. Good. That'll help. Helen flipped a page. Tell me about the fire. Mara explained everything. The warehouse, the body, the fake death. Helen listened, taking notes, asking questions. When Mara finished, Helen set her pen down. This is good. Strong, but we need more. We need witnesses. People who saw the abuse. I didn't tell anyone. No one? Mara hesitated. There was a neighbor, Mrs. Halloway. She lived next door. She heard us fighting once, came over to check on me. Did she see anything? Bruises on my arms? That's something. I'll track her down. Helen looked at Rowan. What about you? You willing to testify? About what? About Mara's condition when she arrived, her injuries, her fear. Yeah, I'll testify. Good. Helen stood. I'll file a motion to challenge the custody claim. But Rowan, you need to understand this is going to get messy. Victor's going to fight dirty, and if he's as connected as Mara says, the deck's stacked against us. I don't care. You should, because if we lose, Mara goes back to him. And Eli, we're not going to lose, Rowan said firmly. Helen studied him. You really believe that? I have to. She nodded slowly. All right, then let's get to work. They left Helen's office as the sun was setting, the sky streaked with orange and pink. Mara was quiet on the drive home, staring out the window. You okay? Rowan asked. I don't know. Talking about it all, it makes it real again. It was always real. I know, but I've spent so long trying to forget. Rowan reached over and took her hand. You don't have to forget. You just have to survive. She squeezed his hand. Thank you. For what? For believing me. Why wouldn't I? Because most people don't. They think I'm exaggerating, or lying, or that I deserved it somehow. Rowan's jaw tightened. You didn't deserve any of it. Mara's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't let them fall. I'm starting to believe that. Good. When they got home, Rowan built a fire while Mara put Eli to bed. She came back downstairs 20 minutes later, her face drawn. He's asleep. Good. She sat beside him on the couch, close enough that their shoulders touched. They sat in silence for a while, watching the flames. Rowan? Yeah? What happens if we lose? He didn't answer right away. We won't. But if we do, then we run together. Mara looked at him, her eyes searching his. You'd do that? Give up everything? This ranch, this life, it's just things. You and Eli, you're people, and people matter more. Mara's breath caught. You really mean that? Yeah. She leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. I don't deserve you. That's not true. It is. You've given me everything, and I've given you nothing but trouble. Rowan wrapped an arm around her. Shao, you gave me a reason to wake up in the morning. That's more than I've had in 5 years. They sat like that for a long time, the fire crackling, the world quiet outside. And for the first time in weeks, Mara felt something close to peace. But peace didn't last. 3 days later, the sheriff showed up. Rowan was in the barn when he heard the truck. He walked out to see Sheriff Tom Briggs stepping out of his cruiser, a grim look on his face. Tom, Rowan said. Rowan. Tom tipped his hat. We need to talk. About what? About the woman you're harboring. Rowan's stomach sank. I'm not harboring anyone. Don't lie to me, Rowan. I've known you too long for that. Tom pulled out a folded piece of paper. I've got a court order. Says Mara Calloway is to be remanded into custody pending a hearing. On what grounds? Child endangerment. Kidnapping. Take your pick. That's bull and you know it. Maybe. But it's not my call. Tom looked uncomfortable. I don't want to do this, Rowan. But I don't have a choice. Everyone's got a choice. Tom sighed. Where is she? Inside. I need to take her in. Not without a fight. Tom's hand moved to his holster. Don't make this harder than it has to be. Then don't take her. They stood there, locked in a standoff. Then Mara appeared in the doorway, Eli in her arms. It's okay, Rowan, she said quietly. I'll go. Mara, it's okay. She walked toward them, her chin up. I'm not running anymore. Tom looked relieved. Thank you, ma'am. If you'll just come with me. Not without calling my lawyer first, Mara said. Tom hesitated. That's your right. Rowan pulled out his phone and dialed Helen. She answered on the second ring. They're here, he said. Don't let them take her anywhere until I get there. I'm 10 minutes out. Rowan hung up. My lawyer's on her way. You can wait. Tom nodded. Fine, but she's still coming in. Helen arrived in 9 minutes, her car skidding to a stop in the driveway. She got out, briefcase in hand, and marched straight to Tom. Sheriff? Helen Carver. I'm representing Ms. Calloway. Ma'am, let me see that court order. Tom handed it over. Helen scanned it, her face darkening. This is a joke. There's no evidence here, no testimony, just allegations. Judge signed it. Which judge? Harmon. Helen's expression turned to stone. Of course it was. You know him? Oh, I know him. He's Victor Graves' cousin. She looked at Tom. This is a setup. That's not for me to decide. No. But you can refuse to execute an illegal order. Tom shifted uncomfortably. I can't do that. Then I'm coming with her, and I'm filing an emergency motion to dismiss this nonsense. Tom nodded. Fair enough. Mara handed Eli to Rowan. The baby looked up at him with those dark, knowing eyes. Take care of him, she said. Mara, please. Rowan took the baby, feeling the weight of him settle in his arms. I will. I promise. Mara kissed Eli's forehead, then turned and walked to Tom's cruiser. Helen followed. Rowan stood there holding Eli, watching as they drove away. And for the first time since Eleanor died, Rowan felt truly, terrifyingly helpless. Eli cried for the first time that night. Rowan had never heard him make a sound louder than a whimper, but now the baby wailed, a raw, desperate sound that filled the empty house and made Rowan's chest ache. He tried everything, bottle, diaper change, rocking, walking. Nothing worked. I know, Rowan said quietly, pacing the living room floor with Eli against his shoulder. I know, buddy. I miss her too. The baby's cries eventually subsided into hiccuping sobs, then exhausted silence. His small body went limp against Rowan's chest, and his breathing evened out. Rowan stood there for another 10 minutes, afraid to move, afraid to break whatever fragile peace had settled over them. When he finally lowered Eli into the makeshift crib, the baby's eyes opened, dark and accusing. She's coming back, Rowan whispered. I promise. Eli stared at him, then closed his eyes. Rowan went downstairs and called Helen. She answered on the fourth ring, sounding exhausted. Where is she? Rowan demanded. County lockup. They're holding her overnight. On what grounds? Judge Harmon denied bail, said she's a flight risk. That's insane. That's Victor. Helen sighed. The hearing's tomorrow at 10. I'm going to tear this thing apart. But Rowan, you need to prepare yourself. For what? For the possibility that we lose. Harmon's in Victor's pocket. He's not going to rule in our favor unless we give him no choice. Then we give him no choice. I'm working on it, but I need you to do something. What? Find witnesses. Anyone who saw Mara's injuries. Anyone who knew about the abuse. We need people willing to testify. She said there was a neighbor, Mrs. Halloway. I tracked her down. She's willing to talk, but she's scared. Victor's people have been asking questions. Rowan's grip tightened on the phone. I'll handle it. Rowan, I said I'll handle it. Helen was quiet for a moment. Be careful. Victor's escalating. And if you get in his way, I'm already in his way. Then watch your back. She hung up. Rowan stood in the kitchen, staring at nothing. The house felt wrong without Mara. Too quiet. Too empty. He'd gotten used to her presence, the sound of her moving around, the smell of her cooking, the way she hummed under her breath when she thought no one was listening. He shook his head. Focus. He grabbed his coat and headed for the door, then stopped. He couldn't leave Eli alone. He looked at the baby, asleep in the drawer, and made a decision he knew was probably stupid. He bundled Eli into the truck. The drive to Millbrook took 45 minutes. Rowan had only been to the city a handful of times, and he hated it more each visit. Too many people. Too much noise. Everything felt claustrophobic after the wide open spaces of Iron Ridge Valley. He found Mrs. Halloway's address in a modest neighborhood on the east side. Small houses with neat lawns and chain-link fences. Her place was a pale yellow bungalow with flower boxes in the windows, though the flowers were long dead from winter. Rowan parked and got out, carefully lifting Eli from his car seat. The baby was awake now, looking around with those unnervingly observant eyes. He knocked. The door opened a crack, and a woman's face appeared, mid-60s, gray hair, sharp blue eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Mrs. Halloway? Who's asking? My name's Rowan Blackthorne. I'm a friend of Mara Calloway's. The woman's expression shuddered. I don't know anyone by that name. Please, I just need 5 minutes. I can't help you. She's in jail right now because of him, because of Victor. And if people don't speak up, I said I can't help. She started to close the door. Eli made a soft sound. Mrs. Halloway stopped. Her eyes went to the baby. Is that Eli, Mara's son? The woman's face crumpled. She opened the door wider. Come in, quickly. The house was warm and smelled like cinnamon. Mrs. Halloway gestured to a worn couch, and Rowan sat, settling Eli on his lap. I'm sorry, she said, wringing her hands. I can't be seen talking to you. Victor has people everywhere. I know, but Mara needs help. I want to help. I do. But you don't understand what he's capable of. Then tell me. Mrs. Halloway sat in a chair across from him, her hands trembling. I lived next door to them for 2 years. Sweet girl, Mara. Always polite, always smiling, even when you could see she was hurting. You saw the abuse. I heard it. Through the walls, him yelling, her crying, things breaking. She looked down. One night, it got so bad I called the police. What happened? Nothing. By the time they showed up, everything was quiet. Victor told them it was a misunderstanding. The officers believed him, or pretended to. Did you ever talk to Mara about it? Once. She came over with a black eye, said she needed to borrow sugar. I asked her outright. Did he do that? She just smiled and said she'd tripped. Mrs. Halloway's voice broke. I should have pushed harder, should have done more. You did what you could. Did I? She looked at Eli. Is she okay? The baby? She's fighting, but she needs people to stand with her. I can't testify. If I do, Victor will... Will what? Mrs. Halloway stood and crossed to the window, peering through the curtains. 2 weeks ago, a man came to my door, said he was doing a survey, asked me questions about the neighborhood, about Mara. I told him I didn't remember her. But he knew you were lying. Yes. She turned back. The next day, my car wouldn't start. Engine had been tampered with, and I found a note under my windshield wiper. It just said, Mind your business. Rowan's jaw tightened. He's threatening you. Not directly, but the message was clear. Mrs. Halloway, if you don't speak up, Mara loses her son, and she goes back to him. The woman's eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But I can't. Rowan stood. If you change your mind, I won't. He carried Eli to the door, then stopped. You said you heard them fighting. Did you ever record it? Mrs. Halloway blinked. What? On your phone, a video, anything. She hesitated. Once. The yelling was so loud I thought someone was going to die. I recorded it in case I needed to call the police again. Do you still have it? I don't know, maybe. Can you check? She disappeared into another room. Rowan waited, Eli squirming in his arms. A minute later, she returned with an old smartphone. I haven't used this in years, but... She scrolled through the files. Here. She handed him the phone. Rowan pressed play. The audio was muffled but clear enough. A man's voice, sharp, venomous. You're pathetic. You think you can leave me? You think anyone else would want you? Then Mara's voice, quieter but defiant. I'm not doing this anymore, Victor. A crash. Glass breaking. You'll do what I tell you. Rowan's blood turned to ice. Can I have this? He asked. Mrs. Halloway looked terrified. If Victor finds out, he won't. I'll keep your name out of it. She hesitated, then nodded. Take it. Just please don't tell anyone where you got it. I won't. Thank you. He left quickly, Eli clutched against his chest. As he drove away, he glanced in the rearview mirror. Mrs. Halloway stood in her doorway, watching him go. She looked like she was waiting for the world to end. Back at the ranch, Rowan called Helen and told her about the recording. This is good, she said. Really good. It's not enough to win on its own, but combined with Mara's testimony. What about the doctor? Mara said she had hospital records. I'm tracking those down, but the hospital's dragging their feet. Probably got a call from Victor's people. Can they do that? Not legally, but it doesn't mean they won't try. Helen paused. How's the baby? Rowan looked at Eli, who was chewing on a teething ring and watching the fire. Surviving. You're doing good, Rowan. Doesn't feel like it. That's because you care. And caring always feels like losing until you win. She hung up. Rowan made a bottle and fed Eli, then put him down for the night. The baby fought sleep, his eyes darting around the room like he was searching for something. She'll be back tomorrow, Rowan said quietly. I promise. Eli stared at him for a long moment, then finally closed his eyes. Rowan went downstairs and poured himself a drink. He sat by the fire, the recording playing over and over in his head. He'd heard men like Victor before. During the war, officers who used fear instead of respect. Men who mistook cruelty for strength. He'd hated them then. He hated them more now. The next morning, Rowan woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the sound of a car engine. He sat up, instantly alert, and grabbed the rifle from beside the bed. But when he looked out the window, it wasn't Victor's people. It was Helen. She got out of her car, looking exhausted but determined. Rowan met her at the door, Eli in his arms. What are you doing here? He asked. The hearing's in 2 hours. I know, but I needed to talk to you first. She stepped inside. We have a problem. What kind of problem? Victor's filing for emergency custody. He's claiming Mara's mentally unstable and that you're manipulating her. That's insane. I know, but he's got a psychiatrist willing to testify that Mara has delusional tendencies, and he's got witnesses who'll say you coerced her into staying with you. Rowan's grip tightened on Eli. Who are these witnesses? Gideon Pike, the private investigator, and a woman named Sarah Winters. The name hit Rowan like a punch. Sarah, he said quietly. Helen's expression softened. You know her. Yeah, we dated, years ago. She's testifying that you're emotionally unstable, that you've been reclusive and paranoid since your wife's death. She's not wrong. That doesn't matter. What matters is how it looks to the judge. Helen set her briefcase down. Rowan, this is going to get ugly. They're going to attack you, your character, your motives, everything. Let them. Are you sure you're ready for that? Rowan looked down at Eli. The baby was staring up at him, those dark eyes full of trust. Yeah, he said, I'm sure. The courthouse was a squat brick building in the center of Millbrook, surrounded by oak trees and a parking lot full of expensive cars. Rowan pulled in and killed the engine. Eli strapped into the car seat beside him. Let's go get your mom, he said. Inside, the halls smelled like old wood and lemon cleaner. Helen met him in the lobby, flanked by a younger woman carrying a stack of files. This is my associate, Claire, Helen said. She's been helping with the research. Claire nodded. She looked nervous. Is Mara here? Rowan asked. In holding. They'll bring her out when the hearing starts. Helen checked her watch. We've got 15 minutes. Let me walk you through what's going to happen. They found a bench in a corner, and Helen explained the process. Opening statements, witness testimony, cross-examination. It sounded like a war fought with words instead of bullets. Victor will be here, Helen said, and he'll testify. Rowan's jaw tightened. Good. I want to see him. Rowan, I want to see the man who did this to her. Helen studied him. Just don't do anything stupid. No promises. At exactly 10 o'clock, they were called into the courtroom. It was smaller than Rowan expected, wood-paneled walls, a handful of benches, a raised platform where Judge Harmon sat like a king on a throne. And there, at the defendant's table, sat Victor Graves. He was everything Rowan had imagined, and worse. Mid-40s, clean-shaven, wearing a tailored suit that probably cost more than Rowan's truck. His hair was dark and perfectly styled, his posture relaxed, his expression calm. He looked like a man who'd never been told no in his life. When Victor's eyes landed on Rowan, something flickered there. Recognition, assessment, dismissal. Then he smiled. It was the kind of smile that didn't reach the eyes. Rowan felt his hands curl into fists. A door opened and Mara was let in by a bailiff. She looked small in her orange jumpsuit, her hair pulled back, her face pale. But when she saw Rowan, when she saw Eli, her whole expression changed. Relief, hope, love. Rowan held up the baby so she could see him. Eli kicked his legs, reaching toward her. Mara pressed a hand to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. "All rise," the bailiff announced. Everyone stood. Judge Harmon entered, a man in his 60s with silver hair and cold eyes. He sat, banged his gavel, and the room settled. "We're here for the matter of custody regarding the minor child, Elijah Graves," Harmon said. "Counselors, are you ready to proceed?" Helen stood. "Yes, Your Honor." Victor's lawyer stood too, a man named Douglas Kane, slick and sharp-eyed. "Ready, Your Honor?" "Mr. Kane, you may begin." Kane stepped forward, all polish and precision. "Your Honor, this case is straightforward. Victor Graves is a loving father whose wife suffered a mental breakdown following a traumatic event. In her unstable state, Mrs. Graves fled with their child and sought refuge with a stranger, Mr. Blackthorne, who has exploited her vulnerability for his own purposes." Rowan's jaw clenched. "We have expert testimony," Kane continued, "that Mrs. Graves exhibits signs of paranoid delusion. She believes her husband, who was legally declared dead 6 months ago, is alive and pursuing her. This is not reality. This is a woman in crisis who needs help, not enablement." Helen stood. "Objection. Counsel is testifying instead of presenting evidence." "Sustained," Harmon said, though his tone suggested he didn't care. "Mr. Kane, stick to the facts." Kane smiled. "Of course, Your Honor. The facts are these. Mara Graves took her child without legal authority, fled across county lines, and is now living with a man who has a documented history of isolation and instability. We're asking the court to place Elijah in his father's custody while Mrs. Graves receives the psychiatric care she desperately needs." He sat down. Helen rose and Rowan could see the fire in her eyes. "Your Honor, the facts Mr. Kane presented are fiction. Mara Calloway, not Graves, as she legally reverted to her maiden name, is not delusional. She is a survivor of sustained domestic abuse at the hands of Victor Graves, a man who faked his own death to escape legal and financial consequences." Victor's expression didn't change, but Kane stood. "Objection. There's no evidence Mr. Graves faked anything." "There's a death certificate," Harmon said. "Fraudulently obtained," Helen shot back, "which we will prove." Harmon leaned back. "You'll get your chance, Ms. Carver. But right now, I'm more interested in the child's welfare. Mr. Kane, call your first witness." Kane stood. "The petitioner calls Dr. Marcus Fielding." A man in his 50s took the stand, gray suit, wire-rimmed glasses, the look of someone who'd spent his life in academic halls. He was sworn in. Kane approached. "Dr. Fielding, what is your profession?" "I'm a clinical psychologist specializing in trauma and delusional disorders." "And have you evaluated Mrs. Graves?" "I have. Based on the reports and testimony provided, it's my professional opinion that she exhibits signs of post-traumatic stress disorder with paranoid features." "Can you explain that for the court?" Fielding adjusted his glasses. "Mrs. Graves has constructed a narrative in which her deceased husband is alive and pursuing her. This is a common coping mechanism following trauma. The mind creates an external threat to explain internal distress." Rowan's hands clenched. Helen stood. "Objection. Dr. Fielding never actually met with my client. This is speculation, not diagnosis." Harmon frowned. "Is that true, doctor?" "I haven't met with her personally, no, but based on the documentation, then this is inadmissible," Helen said. "You can't diagnose someone you've never examined." Kane stepped in. "Your Honor, Dr. Fielding is offering an expert opinion based on available evidence. Which is hearsay, Helen countered. Harmon waved a hand. I'll allow it. But Ms. Carver, you'll have your turn. Helen sat, her jaw tight. Kane continued. Dr. Fielding, in your opinion, is Mrs. Graves a danger to her child? Not intentionally, but her inability to distinguish reality from delusion puts the child at risk. Thank you. No further questions. Helen stood and approached the stand like a predator. Dr. Fielding, you said you based your opinion on documentation. What documentation? Police reports, hospital records, witness statements. Did any of those records mention physical injuries consistent with abuse? Fielding hesitated. There were some injuries noted. Broken ribs, lacerations, bruising, correct? Yes. And yet you concluded she was delusional? The injuries could have been self-inflicted. Self-inflicted broken ribs? Helen's voice dripped with disbelief. Doctor, have you ever broken your own ribs? Of course not. Then on what basis do you claim hers were self-inflicted? Fielding shifted. It's theoretically possible. Theoretically, but not supported by evidence. The evidence is ambiguous. Or, Helen said, the evidence shows exactly what my client claims. Sustained abuse by her husband. A husband who, by the way, you assume is dead because someone told you so. There's a death certificate. Have you verified it? That's not my area of expertise. Then perhaps you shouldn't be making assumptions. Helen turned to the judge. No further questions. Fielding stepped down, looking flustered. Kane called his next witness. The petitioner calls Gideon Pike. The private investigator took the stand, the same lean man who'd come to Rowan's ranch. He was sworn in. Mr. Pike, what is your profession? Private investigator. And were you hired to locate Mrs. Graves? I was, by Mr. Graves, shortly after his recovery from the fire. Rowan's eyes narrowed. Recovery. So they were admitting Victor was alive. Can you describe the circumstances of locating her? I tracked her movements through financial transactions and witness reports. She was last seen in Iron Ridge Valley, at the property of Rowan Blackthorne. And when you approached Mr. Blackthorne, what was his response? Hostile. He threatened me with a firearm and refused to cooperate. Helen stood. Objection. Mr. Blackthorne was defending his property from an uninvited stranger. That's not hostility, that's common sense. Sustained, Harmon said, though he didn't look happy about it. Kane continued, Mr. Pike, in your professional opinion, was Mrs. Graves being held against her will? I couldn't determine that, but Mr. Blackthorne was clearly invested in keeping her there. Thank you. No further questions. Helen approached. Mr. Pike, you said you were hired by Victor Graves shortly after his recovery. Recovery from what? The fire. The fire that allegedly killed him? Pike shifted. He survived. So he's alive. Obviously. Then why is there a death certificate on file? I don't know. You don't know. But you're comfortable helping a man who faked his own death hunt down his wife? I was hired to find a missing person. A missing person who left voluntarily. That's debatable. Is it? Did you ever ask Mrs. Graves if she wanted to be found? Pike's jaw tightened. No. Then you have no idea what she wants. No further questions. Pike stepped down. Kane stood. Your Honor, the petitioner calls Victor Graves. The room went silent. Victor stood and walked to the stand with the easy confidence of a man who'd never lost anything. He was sworn in, his hand on the Bible, his voice steady. Rowan watched him, his hands clenched so tight his knuckles went white. Kane approached. Mr. Graves, can you describe your relationship with your wife? Victor's expression softened, perfectly calibrated. Mara and I met 5 years ago. We fell in love, got married. I thought we were happy. What changed? When she got pregnant, she started pulling away. I thought it was hormones at first, but it got worse. She became paranoid, accusatory. She'd claim I was hurting her when I'd never laid a hand on her. Rowan's vision went red. And after the baby was born? It got worse. She refused help, refused therapy. Then one day she disappeared with Eli. I've been searching for them ever since. And when you discovered she was with Mr. Blackthorne? Victor's eyes went to Rowan, cold and assessing. I was concerned. A strange man with a history of violence. Helen shot to her feet. Objection. Mr. Blackthorne has no history of violence. Kane smiled. Your Honor, Mr. Blackthorne is a decorated veteran. He saw combat. Combat service is not violence, Helen snapped. Harmon banged his gavel. Enough. Mr. Kane, rephrase. Kane nodded. Mr. Graves, were you concerned for your son's safety? Terrified. Thank you. No further questions. Helen stood slowly. She walked to the stand, and when she spoke, her voice was ice. Mr. Graves, you said you never hurt your wife. That's correct. Then how do you explain the hospital records documenting broken ribs, lacerations, and contusions? Accidents. She was clumsy. Clumsy enough to break her own ribs? She fell down the stairs. Multiple times. Victor's mask slipped just for a second. Irritation flashed in his eyes. Yes. Helen pulled out a file. Your Honor, I'd like to enter into evidence hospital records from St. Mary's dated 18 months ago. The attending physician noted injuries inconsistent with a fall. She handed the file to the bailiff, who passed it to Harmon. The judge scanned it, his expression unreadable. Helen turned back to Victor. Mr. Graves, you said your wife became paranoid. Can you give an example? She accused me of following her, watching her. It was nonsense. Was it? Because we have testimony that you hired Mr. Pike to track her movements. After she left. But she left because she was afraid of you. That's her delusion. Or, Helen said, it's the truth. And you can't stand that she escaped. Victor's jaw tightened. I loved my wife. Past tense? She's not the woman I married. No, she's the woman who survived you. Kane stood. Objection. Counsel is badgering the witness. Harmon nodded. Sustained. Move on, Ms. Carver. Helen didn't move. She just stared at Victor, and for a moment the whole room held its breath. Then she smiled. No further questions. Victor stepped down, his composure cracked just enough to show the rage beneath, and Rowan knew. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Harmon called a 15-minute recess. The courtroom emptied in a shuffle of feet and whispered conversations, but Rowan stayed in his seat, Eli sleeping against his shoulder. He watched Victor through the gap in the door. Watched him stand in the hallway surrounded by his lawyer and two other men in expensive suits, all of them talking in low voices. Victor looked calm, controlled, like he'd already won. Helen appeared at Rowan's side, her briefcase open on the bench beside him. We need to talk. About what? About what comes next. I'm calling Mara to the stand. Rowan looked at her. Is that smart? They'll tear her apart. They'll try, but she's our best weapon. The jury needs to see her, hear her, believe her. There's no jury. No, I know, but Harmon needs to see her too. He needs to look her in the eye while she tells the truth. You think that'll change anything? Helen's expression hardened. I think it's our only shot. The bailiff called them back in. Rowan settled into his seat, adjusting Eli in his arms. The baby stirred but didn't wake. Harmon returned to his bench, looking irritated. Ms. Carver, call your first witness. Helen stood. The defense calls Mara Calloway. The bailiff brought Mara from the holding area. She walked to the stand slowly, her hands clasped in front of her. She looked small in the orange jumpsuit, but when she sat down and placed her hand on the Bible, her chin came up. She was sworn in. Helen approached, her voice gentle. Mara, can you tell the court how you met Victor Graves? Mara took a breath. I was working at a diner in Millbrook. He came in one night. We talked. He was charming, funny. He made me feel special. When did you get married? 6 months later. And when did things change? Mara's hands tightened in her lap. Right after the wedding. He didn't like the way I dressed. Didn't like my friends. He wanted me to quit my job, stay home. I thought he was just being protective. When did he first hurt you? Mara's voice dropped. 6 months after we got married. We had a fight about money. I told him I wanted to go back to work. He slapped me. Then he cried and said he was sorry, said it would never happen again. But it did. Every week, sometimes every day. Helen pulled out a folder. Your Honor, I'd like to enter these photographs into evidence. They show injuries Mrs. Calloway sustained during her marriage. She handed the folder to the bailiff. Harmon flipped through the photos, his expression unchanging. But Rowan saw his jaw tighten. The photos were bad. Bruises, cuts, a black eye so swollen it was nearly shut. Helen continued, Mara, did you ever seek help? I tried, once. I went to the police, filed a report, but Victor's family knows everyone. The charges were dropped. Did you try to leave? Yes. 3 times. Each time he found me. And each time it got worse. What about when you got pregnant? Mara's eyes filled with tears. He didn't want the baby. He said it would ruin everything. He tried to make me... Her voice broke. He wanted me to get rid of it. But you didn't. No, I couldn't. And how did Victor react? He got worse. He'd push me, shove me into walls. Once he threw a bottle at me. It broke against my ribs. She pulled up her sleeve, showing the scar. Several people in the gallery gasped. Helen's voice was steady. Mara, why didn't you leave sooner? Because I was afraid, and because I didn't have anywhere to go. No money, no family. He made sure of that. What changed? The fire. When I heard Victor was dead, I thought I was free, but then I saw the body, and I knew. Knew what? That it wasn't him, that he'd faked it, that he was still out there. So you ran. Yes. I took Eli and left in the middle of the night. I've been running ever since. Helen turned to face the judge. Your Honor, this woman is not delusional. She is not unstable. She is a survivor, and she deserves to raise her son in safety. She sat down. Kane stood, his expression sharp. Mrs. Graves. Calloway? Mara corrected. Excuse me? My name is Calloway. I reverted to my maiden name. Kane smiled thinly. Mrs. Calloway, then. You said you saw the body after the fire. How did you gain access to the morgue? I told them I was his wife. And the medical examiner allowed you to view the body? Yes. Did you examine it closely? Mara hesitated. It was burned, but I could tell it wasn't him. How? The scar. Victor has a scar on his collarbone. The body didn't. And you're certain of this? Even though the body was severely burned? Yes. Mrs. Calloway, isn't it possible you were in shock? That you saw what you wanted to see? No. You wanted Victor to be alive? No, I wanted to be sure. Kane paced. You claim my client abused you for years, yet you never pressed charges, never sought a restraining order, never left permanently. Why? I told you, I tried. He always found me. Or perhaps you never really wanted to leave. Mara's eyes flashed. I wanted to leave every single day. Then why stay? Because I was terrified. Because he told me he'd kill me if I left. Because he owned the town and I had nowhere to go. Kane leaned on the witness stand. Mrs. Calloway, you're asking this court to believe that a prominent businessman faked his own death, staged a fire, and is now hunting you down. Does that sound reasonable to you? It sounds like the truth. Or it sounds like the delusion of a troubled woman. Helen stood. Objection. Counsel is testifying. Sustained, Harmon said. Kane smirked. No further questions. Mara stepped down, her hand shaking. As she passed Rowan, their eyes met. He gave her a small nod. You did good. Helen stood. Your Honor, the defense calls Rowan Blackthorne. Rowan's stomach dropped. He looked at Helen, who nodded toward the stand. He handed Eli to Claire, who took the baby carefully. Then he walked to the stand and was sworn in. Helen approached. Mr. Blackthorne, how did you meet Mara Calloway? She showed up at my ranch during a blizzard, knocked on my door with her baby in her arms. What was her condition? Exhausted, scared. She'd walked 10 miles through the storm. Did she tell you why? Not at first, but eventually yes. She said she was running from her husband. Did you believe her? Yes. Why? Rowan looked at Mara. Because I've seen enough fear in my life to know when it's real. Helen pulled out the recording. Your Honor, I'd like to play an audio file obtained from a witness. It was recorded 2 years ago during one of the Graves' domestic disputes. She played the recording. Victor's voice filled the courtroom, venomous and cold. You're pathetic. You think you can leave me? You think anyone else would want you? Then Mara's voice, quiet but firm. I'm not doing this anymore, Victor. The sound of glass shattering. You'll do what I tell you. The courtroom was silent when it ended. Helen turned to Rowan. Mr. Blackthorne, in your opinion, is Mara Calloway a danger to her son? No, she's the only thing keeping him safe. Thank you. No further questions. Kane stood, his expression predatory. Mr. Blackthorne, you're a veteran, correct? Yes. And you saw combat? Yes. Did you kill people? Helen stood. Objection? Relevance? Your Honor, I'm establishing Mr. Blackthorne's state of mind. Harmon nodded. I'll allow it. Rowan's jaw tightened. Yes. I killed people. How many? I don't know. You don't know? I didn't keep count. Kane paced. Mr. Blackthorne, after your wife's death, you isolated yourself. You stopped seeing friends, stopped going to town. Is that correct? Yes. Would you say you were depressed? Yes. Unstable? No. But you were alone, grieving, and then a beautiful woman shows up at your door with a baby. That must have felt like a second chance. Rowan's hands clenched. That's not what happened. Isn't it? You let her stay. You fed her, clothed her, defended her. Why? Because it was the right thing to do. Or because you saw an opportunity. Helen shot to her feet. Objection. Counsel is making unfounded accusations. Sustained. Mr. Kane, stick to the facts. Kane smiled. Mr. Blackthorne, did you sleep with Mrs. Calloway? The courtroom went dead silent. Rowan's eyes went to Mara. She looked stricken. No, he said quietly. Are you in love with her? Rowan hesitated, and in that hesitation, everything changed. Kane pounced. You are, aren't you? That's not... You fell in love with another man's wife, and now you're trying to take his child. No. Then answer the question. Are you in love with Mara Calloway? Rowan looked at Mara, at her eyes, wide and terrified, at the way she was holding her breath, and he realized something. The truth mattered, even if it cost him. Yes, he said quietly. The courtroom erupted. Harmon banged his gavel, shouting for order. Helen closed her eyes. Kane smiled like a cat with a cornered mouse, and Victor's expression turned triumphant. Rowan kept his eyes on Mara. She was crying. Kane leaned on the stand. So you admit it, you're emotionally involved. Yes? And that colors your judgment. No, it clears it. Kane blinked. Excuse me? Rowan leaned forward. I spent 5 years alone. 5 years dead inside. And then Mara showed up, and for the first time since I lost Eleanor, I remembered what it felt like to be human, to care about someone, to want to protect them. So yeah, I'm in love with her. But that doesn't make me a liar. It makes me someone who knows what real love looks like. And what Victor did to her? That's not love. That's ownership. And I'll be damned if I let him take her back. The courtroom was silent. Kane recovered quickly. Very touching, Mr. Blackthorne. But this isn't about your feelings. It's about what's best for the child. Then the child should stay with his mother, because she's the only one who's ever put him first. Kane smirked. No further questions. Rowan stepped down. As he passed Victor, their eyes met. Victor's smile was cold. You just lost, the smile said. Helen called her next witness. The defense calls Mrs. Dorothy Halloway. Rowan's head snapped up. He looked toward the back of the courtroom, and there she was, the elderly woman from Millbrook, walking slowly down the aisle. She looked terrified. But she was here. She took the stand and was sworn in. Helen approached gently. Mrs. Halloway, how do you know Mara Calloway? She lived next door to me for 2 years. And during that time, did you observe anything unusual? Mrs. Halloway's hands trembled. I heard fighting, yelling, things breaking. Did you ever see injuries on Mrs. Calloway? Yes. Bruises. A black eye once. Did she tell you how she got them? She said she fell, but I knew better. Why didn't you report it? Mrs. Halloway's voice broke. Because I was scared, and I'm ashamed of that. But I'm not scared anymore. She looked at Victor, her eyes full of defiance. That man is dangerous, and Mara deserves better. Kane tried to cross-examine, but Mrs. Halloway didn't budge. She repeated her story, her voice growing stronger with each answer. When she stepped down, she walked past Victor without looking at him. Helen called one more witness. The defense calls Dr. Sarah Chen. A woman in her 30s took the stand, professional, composed. She was sworn in. Dr. Chen, what is your profession? I'm a physician at St. Mary's Hospital. I treated Mara Calloway 18 months ago. Can you describe her injuries? She had 3 broken ribs, multiple contusions, and a laceration requiring 12 stitches. Did she tell you how she got them? She said she fell down the stairs. Did you believe her? Dr. Chen hesitated. No, the injuries weren't consistent with a fall. They looked like someone had beaten her. Did you report this? I tried, but Mrs. Calloway refused to press charges, and without her cooperation, there was nothing I could do. Helen nodded. Thank you. No further questions. Kane didn't even bother cross-examining. Helen turned to the judge. Your Honor, the defense rests. Harmon looked at Kane. Mr. Kane? Kane stood, but for the first time he looked uncertain. The petitioner rests as well. Harmon nodded. Closing arguments. Miss Carver? Helen stood and walked to the center of the courtroom. She didn't use notes. She just spoke from the heart. Your Honor, this case is about power. Victor Graves is a man who believes he owns people. He owned Mara, and when she dared to leave, he couldn't accept it, so he faked his death. He manipulated the system, and now he's using this court to finish what he started, taking away the one thing Mara has left, her son. She turned to face Victor. But Mara Calloway is not property. She is a human being who survived years of abuse and found the courage to walk 10 miles through a blizzard to save her child. That is not delusion. That is not instability. That is love. And love, Your Honor, is the only thing that matters in this courtroom. She sat down. Kane stood. His closing was polished, calculated. He talked about Victor's rights as a father, about Mara's mental state, about the need for stability, but his words rang hollow after Helen's. Harmon banged his gavel. I'll take this under advisement. We'll reconvene in 1 hour. The courtroom emptied. Rowan found Mara in the hallway, flanked by 2 bailiffs. He couldn't touch her, couldn't hold her, but he stood close enough that she could feel him there. You did good, he said quietly. Did I? Yeah. Rowan, what you said in there, I meant it. Her eyes filled with tears. I don't deserve you. That's not for you to decide. The bailiffs led her away. Rowan watched her go, his chest tight. Helen appeared at his side. That was either the smartest thing you've ever done or the dumbest. I know. You realize you just handed Kane ammunition. I don't care. Helen smiled faintly. Yeah, I figured. An hour later, they were called back into the courtroom. Harmon sat at his bench, a single piece of paper in front of him. The room was silent. Harmon looked up. I've reviewed the evidence and testimony presented today. This is an unusual case. On one hand, we have a father seeking custody of his child. On the other, we have a mother fleeing what she claims is abuse. He paused. Normally, I would err on the side of the father. Fathers have rights. But in this case, the evidence is compelling. The hospital records, the witness testimony, the audio recording, all of it paints a picture of sustained abuse. Victor's expression darkened. Furthermore, Harmon continued, I'm troubled by the circumstances of Mr. Graves' alleged death. A death certificate was filed. A body was identified. And yet, here he sits. That raises serious questions about fraud and legal misconduct. Kane stood. Your Honor, sit down, Mr. Kane. Harmon's voice was ice. I'm not finished. Kane sat. Harmon turned to Mara. Mrs. Calloway, I believe you, and I believe your son is safest with you. Mara's breath hitched. Therefore, I am granting you full custody of Elijah Calloway. Furthermore, I am issuing a permanent restraining order against Victor Graves. He is forbidden from contact with you or the child. Violation of this order will result in immediate arrest. The courtroom erupted. Victor shot to his feet. This is insane. She's lying. Mr. Graves, sit down or I will hold you in contempt. Victor didn't sit. His face twisted with rage. You can't do this. I have rights. You have nothing, Harmon said coldly. And if I find evidence that you faked your death, you'll have even less. Bailiff, escort Mr. Graves from my courtroom. Two bailiffs moved toward Victor. He backed away, his calm mask completely shattered. This isn't over, he snarled, looking at Mara. You hear me? This isn't over. Yes, it is, Harmon said. Get him out of here. They dragged Victor from the courtroom, his shouts echoing down the hall. Mara collapsed into her chair, sobbing. Helen knelt beside her. It's over. You won. I can't believe it. Believe it. You're free. Rowan crossed to her, Eli in his arms. He held out the baby, and Mara took him, clutching him to her chest. My baby, she whispered. My baby. Eli reached up and touched her face, and for the first time in his short life, he smiled. The paperwork took another hour. By the time they walked out of the courthouse, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Mara stood on the steps, breathing in the cold air, Eli in her arms. I'm free, she said, like she couldn't quite believe it. Yeah, Rowan said. You are. She turned to him, tears streaming down her face. Thank you for everything, for believing me, for fighting for me, for... He kissed her. It was gentle, tentative, a question more than a statement. She kissed him back, and when they pulled apart, she was smiling. I love you, she said. I know. When did you know? The night you showed up. I just didn't want to admit it. She laughed, and it was the most beautiful sound Rowan had ever heard. Helen cleared her throat. Hate to interrupt, but we should get moving. Victor's not going to take this well. Rowan nodded. Let's go home. They drove back to Iron Ridge Valley as the stars came out. The valley spread before them like a promise. And for the first time in years, Rowan felt something he'd thought was gone forever. Hope. The first week after the hearing, Rowan barely slept. He kept the rifle by the door and checked the locks 3 times every night. Helen had warned them that Victor wouldn't accept defeat quietly, and Rowan believed her. Men like Victor didn't lose gracefully. They plotted, they waited, they struck when you let your guard down. So Rowan didn't let his guard down. Mara noticed, of course. She'd catch him standing at the window at 2 a.m, watching the darkness beyond the porch light. She never said anything, just came and stood beside him until he finally turned away and went back to bed. On the 8th night, she broke the silence. He's not coming. Rowan didn't look at her. You don't know that. The restraining order means nothing to a man like him. Then what are we supposed to do? Live in fear forever? Rowan turned to face her. She was wearing one of his old flannel shirts, her hair loose around her shoulders. Eli was asleep upstairs, and the house was quiet except for the wind outside. I'm not going to let him hurt you again, Rowan said. I know, but you can't stand guard forever. Watch me. Mara crossed to him and took his hands. Rowan, I didn't survive Victor just to watch you destroy yourself trying to protect me. I'm not destroying myself. You're not sleeping. You're barely eating. You jump every time a car passes on the road. Her voice softened. I need you whole, not broken. Rowan looked down at their joined hands. I failed Eleanor. I'm not going to fail you. You didn't fail Eleanor. What happened to her was an accident. I should have been more careful. Should have waited for the roads to clear. Should have what? Seen the future? Mara squeezed his hands. You can't control everything, Rowan, and you can't save everyone. But you saved me. You saved Eli. That's enough. Is it? Yes. He pulled her close, resting his chin on top of her head. She smelled like soap and coffee and home. I don't know how to stop being afraid, he admitted quietly. Neither do I. But maybe we don't have to stop. Maybe we just have to be afraid together. They stood like that for a long time, holding each other in the darkness. And slowly, the fear began to lose its grip. 2 weeks after the hearing, Helen called with news. Victor's been arrested. Rowan nearly dropped the phone. What? The DA opened an investigation into the fire. Turns out the body they found was a homeless man Victor hired to work at the warehouse. DNA confirmed it wasn't Victor. They're charging him with murder, fraud, and about a dozen other counts. Rowan sat down heavily. He's actually going to jail. If the charges stick, he's looking at 25 to life. And if they don't, then we deal with it. But Rowan, this is good news. Victor's not untouchable anymore. His lawyers are scrambling. His assets are frozen. He's done. Rowan closed his eyes. Thank you, Helen. Don't thank me. Thank Mara. She's the one who had the courage to fight back. When Rowan told Mara, she didn't react the way he expected. She didn't cry or celebrate. She just nodded slowly and went back to folding laundry. Mara, I heard you. You okay? She set down the shirt she was holding. I don't know. Part of me is relieved, but part of me is just tired. Tired of him taking up space in my head. Tired of letting him control my life even when he's not here. He's not controlling anything anymore, isn't he? She looked at Rowan. I still wake up at night thinking I hear his voice. I still flinch when someone raises their hand too fast. I still check the locks twice before bed. He's in jail, but he's still here. Rowan crossed to her and took her face in his hands. Then we'll get him out, together, however long it takes. She leaned into his touch. How are you so sure? Because I've been where you are. After Eleanor died, I carried her ghost for 5 years. Everywhere I went, everything I did, she was there. And I thought that's just how it would be forever. What changed? You showed up, and you reminded me that ghosts only have the power we give them. He kissed her forehead. Victor's not a ghost, he's just a man, and men can be beaten. Mara smiled, just a little. You always know what to say. Not always, but I'm getting better. That night, Mara slept through until morning for the first time in months. Winter began to loosen its grip on Iron Ridge Valley. The snow melted in slow, uneven patches, revealing brown grass and mud beneath. The days grew longer, the nights grew warmer, and the ranch, which had felt like a fortress for so long, began to feel like a home. Mara threw herself into the work with a fierce determination. She repaired the chicken coop, fixed the sagging porch steps, and somehow convinced Rowan's stubborn old mare to let her saddle her. She cooked meals that filled the house with warmth and laughter. She sang to Eli while she worked, old songs her grandmother had taught her, and slowly, the shadows in her eyes began to fade. Eli grew too. At 9 months, he started crawling, pulling himself across the floor with single-minded focus. His favorite destination was Rowan, who he'd pat on the leg until Rowan picked him up. He's got you wrapped around his finger, Mara said one evening, watching Rowan bounce Eli on his knee. He's a smart kid. Takes after his mother. And his stubbornness? Definitely his mother. Rowan grinned. What about me? Does he take after me at all? Mara studied them, the big scarred man and the tiny baby who looked at him with absolute trust. Yeah, she said softly. He's learning what it means to be safe. That's all you. Rowan looked down at Eli, who was chewing on his own fist and staring at the fire. I never thought I'd get this again, Rowan said quietly. A family. You didn't get it. You built it. We built it. Mara crossed to them and sat on the arm of the chair, wrapping her arms around both of them. Yeah, she said, we did. Spring came to the valley like a promise kept. Green pushed through the brown. Flowers bloomed in wild, chaotic patches. The air smelled like rain and earth and possibility. Rowan stood on the porch one morning, watching the sun rise over the mountains, and realized something. He was happy. Not the numb, distant contentment he'd felt before. Real happiness. The kind that came from waking up beside someone you loved. The kind that came from hearing a baby's laugh. The kind that came from knowing you'd survived the worst and come out the other side. Mara appeared beside him, 2 mugs of coffee in her hands. She handed him one. What are you thinking about? She asked. How lucky I am. I call. Lucky? She raised an eyebrow. You took in a stranger during a blizzard, fought a legal battle against a psychopath, and nearly got yourself killed. That's not luck. That's insanity. Maybe. But it brought you here. She smiled and leaned against him. Fair point. They stood in comfortable silence, sipping coffee and watching the valley wake up. Rowan? Yeah? What do we do now? What do you mean? I mean, we survived. We won. But what comes next? Rowan considered the question. We live, we work, we raise Eli, we figure it out as we go. That's it? That's everything. Mara looked up at him. You make it sound simple. It is simple. People make it complicated. She laughed. When did you get so wise? About 5 minutes ago. Don't expect it to last. She kissed him, soft and sweet and full of promise. And Rowan knew, deep in his bones, that this was what Eleanor would have wanted for him. Not to forget her, not to replace her, but to live again. A month later, Rowan found Mara in the barn, mucking out stalls. She looked up when he walked in, wiping sweat from her forehead. "Need help?" he asked. "Always." He grabbed a shovel and worked beside her in comfortable rhythm. After a while, he stopped and leaned on the handle. "I've been thinking. Dangerous." "I'm serious." She set down her shovel. "Okay. What about?" "About us. About what this is." Mara's expression grew cautious. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you've been here for almost 6 months now. You're not a guest anymore. You're not a worker. You're just here. And I want to make it official." "Official how?" Rowan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Mara's eyes went wide. "Rowan, I'm not good at speeches, and I'm probably doing this all wrong. But I know one thing for sure. I love you. I love Eli. And I want you both to stay. Not because you're running from something, but because you're running to something, to a life, to a home, to me." He opened the box. Inside was a simple silver ring with a small diamond. "It was my grandmother's," he said. "I know it's not much, but—" Mara threw her arms around him, nearly knocking him over. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." He slipped the ring on her finger and she held it up to the light, tears streaming down her face. "It's perfect," she whispered. "You sure? Because we can get something nicer." "Rowan Blackthorne, if you keep talking, I'm going to hit you with this shovel." He laughed and kissed her, and somewhere in the house, Eli started crying. "That's my cue," Mara said, pulling away reluctantly. "Our cue. Our cue." They walked back to the house hand in hand, the ring catching the sunlight. They were married 3 weeks later in a small ceremony on the ranch. Helen stood as Mara's witness. Sheriff Tom Briggs, who'd apologized about a dozen times for arresting Mara, stood as Rowan's. Eli sat in Mara's arms, chewing on a teething ring and watching everything with solemn eyes. The ceremony was simple. No fancy decorations. No big crowd. Just 2 people who'd survived hell and decided to build heaven out of the ashes. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Rowan kissed Mara like she was the only thing keeping him tethered to the earth. And maybe she was. Afterward, they had a small reception in the barn. Helen brought champagne. Tom brought a cake his wife had made. Mrs. Halloway showed up with a casserole and a fierce hug for Mara. "You did it," she whispered. "You survived." "We did it," Mara corrected. "Thank you for being brave." Mrs. Halloway wiped her eyes. "I should have been brave sooner." "You were brave when it mattered." As the sun set and the guests left, Rowan and Mara stood on the porch, watching the valley turn gold. "Mrs. Blackthorne," Rowan said, testing out the name. "I like the sound of that." "Me too." Eli squirmed in Mara's arms, reaching for Rowan. He took the baby, settling him against his shoulder. "Think he'll remember any of this?" Rowan asked. "The wedding? Probably not. But he'll remember the feeling." "What feeling?" "Being loved, being safe, being home." Rowan looked at his wife and son, and something in his chest cracked open. Not with pain this time, with joy. "Yeah," he said, "he will." The first year of marriage wasn't easy. They had fights. About money. About how to raise Eli. About whose turn it was to fix the leaking roof. They had moments where the past crept in, where Mara flinched at a raised voice, or Rowan retreated into silence when things got hard. But they worked through it. They learned to talk instead of shutting down, to ask for help instead of suffering alone, to forgive each other's broken pieces instead of demanding perfection. And slowly, impossibly, they healed. Eli's first birthday came on a bright summer day. Mara made a cake, lopsided and messy, but made with love. Rowan hung streamers in the living room, which Eli promptly tried to eat. When they sang and Eli smashed his face into the cake, covering himself in frosting, Mara laughed so hard she cried. "I can't believe he's won," she said, wiping chocolate off Eli's chin. "I can't believe we made it this far." "You doubted us?" "Every single day." She swatted his arm. "Liar." "Okay, fine. Maybe not every day. Just Most of them. That night, after Eli was asleep, they sat on the porch and watched the stars come out. Rowan? Yeah? I want another baby. He turned to look at her. Yeah? Yeah. Eli needs a sibling, and I want him to grow up in a house full of noise and chaos and love. Rowan pulled her close. Then let's make some noise. She laughed and kissed him. And 9 months later, their daughter was born. They named her Hope, not because everything was perfect, but because they'd learned that hope wasn't about perfection. It was about choosing to keep going even when the road was hard, about believing that tomorrow could be better than today, about building something new from the ruins of what came before. Hope Blackthorn came into the world screaming, with a full head of dark hair and her mother's stubborn chin. Eli, now 2 years old, stared at his baby sister with solemn fascination. Baby, he said, poking her gently. That's right, Mara said, exhausted but glowing. That's your sister. My baby. Our baby, Rowan corrected. Eli considered this, then nodded. Our baby. And just like that, their family grew. The years that followed weren't perfect. Nothing ever is. There were hard winters and failed crops and medical bills that made Rowan's head spin. There were nights when Mara woke up from nightmares about Victor, even though he was serving life in prison with no chance of parole. There were days when Rowan felt the weight of Eleanor's ghost and wondered if he'd ever fully let her go. But there were good days too, more good days than bad. Days when Eli brought home his first A from school and Rowan hung it on the fridge like it was a masterpiece. Days when Hope took her first steps and promptly fell on her butt, laughing the whole time. Days when Mara and Rowan worked side by side in the fields, their hands blistered and their backs aching, and felt more alive than they ever had. They built a life together, not a perfect one, but a real one. On their 5th anniversary, Rowan took Mara back to the spot where she'd first knocked on his door. The porch had been rebuilt, the house had been repainted, but the memory was still there. You know what I was thinking that night? Rowan asked. What? That you were going to ruin my life. Mara laughed. Did I? Completely. And I've never been more grateful. She leaned her head on his shoulder. You saved me, you know. No, you saved yourself. I just gave you a place to land. Is that what you think? That's what I know. Mara was quiet for a moment. I used to think survival was enough. That if I could just make it through each day without falling apart, that was winning. But you taught me something better. What's that? That survival isn't the same as living, and that I deserve to do both. Rowan kissed the top of her head. Yeah, you do. They stood there as the sun set, painting the valley in shades of fire and gold. And Rowan realized something. He'd spent 5 years mourning Eleanor. 5 years believing that his life had ended the night she died. But standing here with Mara, with their children asleep inside, with a future stretching out before them, he understood the truth. His life hadn't ended that night. It had just been waiting to begin again. Eli graduated high school at 18, tall and serious, and so much like Rowan it made Mara cry. He'd decided to stay on the ranch, to help his father run the place. Rowan tried to talk him out of it, told him he should see the world first, but Eli just shook his head. This is where I belong, he said simply. And Rowan understood, because it was where he belonged too. Hope went to college, studying agriculture and business, determined to modernize the ranch and drag it into the 21st century. She came home every summer and argued with her father about irrigation systems and crop rotation, and Rowan loved every minute of it. Mara opened a small bakery in town, selling the same recipes her grandmother had taught her. It became the heart of Iron Ridge, a place where people gathered for coffee and conversation and a sense of community. She hired local women, gave them fair wages and second chances, and built something that mattered. And Rowan? Rowan learned to let go. He stopped standing guard at the window every night, stopped jumping at every car on the road, stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop. He learned to trust that the good things in his life were real, that they could last, that he deserved them. It wasn't easy. Some lessons never are. But he learned. On his 60th birthday, the whole family gathered at the ranch. Eli and his wife, Hope and her girlfriend, grandchildren who ran through the house like wild things, friends and neighbors who'd become family over the years. Mara found Rowan on the porch, watching the chaos inside through the window. "You hiding?" she asked. "Observing." "That's what you always say when you're hiding." He smiled and pulled her close. "How'd I get so lucky?" "You weren't lucky. You were brave." "I wasn't brave. I was desperate." "Then I guess desperate looks good on you." They stood there, watching their family through the glass, watching the life they'd built from nothing, from pain, from survival. "You ever regret it?" Rowan asked. "Staying with me instead of starting over somewhere else?" Mara looked up at him, her eyes still as fierce as the night she'd knocked on his door. "Not once," she said. "Not ever. Even with all the hard parts?" "Especially with the hard parts. That's what made it real." Rowan kissed her, soft and slow and full of 30 years of love. "I love you," he said. "I know, you tell me every day. And I'll keep telling you. Every day until I die. And then you'll haunt me and keep telling me from beyond the grave." "Damn right." She laughed and dragged him back inside, into the warmth and noise and beautiful chaos of their life. And as Rowan looked around at the faces of the people he loved, he thought about the man he used to be, the one who'd been so broken he couldn't imagine ever being whole again, the one who'd closed himself off from the world and waited to die. That man was gone. In his place was someone better, someone who'd learned that the worst thing that ever happened to you didn't have to define you, that you could survive hell and still build heaven. That love, real love, wasn't about perfection. It was about showing up every day and choosing each other, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. The ranch that had once been a tomb became a home. The silence that had once been suffocating became filled with laughter. The loneliness that had once consumed him became a distant memory. And the woman who'd stumbled into his life during a blizzard became the reason he kept breathing. Years later, when Rowan and Mara were old and gray and the ranch had passed to Eli and his children, they still walked out to the porch every evening to watch the sunset. "You ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't opened that door?" Mara asked one night. Rowan thought about it, about the man he'd been, about the life he'd been living, about the slow, quiet death he'd been dying. "I think I'd be dead," he said honestly. "Maybe not physically, but in every way that mattered. And now? Now I'm alive because of you." Mara shook her head. "We saved each other." "Yeah," Rowan said, pulling her close. "We did." They sat there as the sun disappeared behind the mountains, painting the sky in colors that had no names. And Rowan understood, finally, what Eleanor had tried to tell him in those last moments before she died. That life was meant to be lived, not survived, not endured, lived, with all its pain and joy and messy, imperfect beauty. He'd lost Eleanor. That was a truth he'd carry forever. But he'd found Mara, found Eli, found hope, found a family and a purpose and a reason to wake up every morning and try again. And that, he realized, was enough, more than enough. It was everything. The ranch stood against the mountains, smoke curling from its chimney, lights glowing in the windows. Inside, children laughed and adults told stories, and life continued in all its chaotic, wonderful complexity. And outside, on the porch where it had all begun, two people who'd walked through fire sat together and watched the stars come out. They'd been broken once, but they'd put each other back together, not perfectly, not smoothly, but real. And real was the only thing that mattered.